Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Emily Worth. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at TRG Screen and your moderator for today. A few housekeeping items as we start. We would like to let everyone know that this session will be recorded and distributed to those who registered. Next, you'll notice a Q&A function for this webinar in the controls, and we encourage you to ask questions of the speakers using this function, but please note that if we aren't able to answer your question live, we will be sure to get you an answer. Lastly, at the conclusion of the webinar, there will be a short survey that will pop up on your screen. We would be really grateful if you would take a couple of minutes to fill this out, as it helps us to better tailor our content to be most valuable to you. And now it is my pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Amjad Zogby, Head of Solutions Engineering at TRG Screen, and Trip Wadley, Global Head of Relationship Management, also at TRG Screen. Gentlemen, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So my name is Amjad. I am, just a quick background, I'm one of the founders of a company called Expansion. We built the XMON product, which we'll be talking about today. We worked in partnership with TRG for the best part of 5 years, and since January this year, Expansion and the team are part of the TRG group. And I'm very excited to talk to you about reference data today.
Hi, I'm Trip Wadley, Global Head of Relationship Management for TRG Screen. Very happy to be here as well. We've worked with Amjad over the last number of years, and it's been an amazing partnership, and we're so glad to have them as part of TRG Screen. Before I was at TRG Screen, over the last 7.5 years, I was at State Street as well as Fidelity and Brown Brothers Harriman, running market data administration and wrestling with some of the challenges we're going to see today.
Great, thank you, Trip. So we're going to start. So we'll be talking about reference data management today, and specifically usage and cost management. Just a couple of points on the agenda. We'll do this around 20 or 25 minutes, see if we can keep a few minutes at the end for the questions. The first thing we'll walk through is the definition of what we mean by reference data. We'll put some context around the challenges of reference data itself, but then move on to the challenges that market data teams face when managing reference data. We'll then focus on 2 points in the reference data usage management, which are optimizing spend or reducing costs and how we could do that, and ensuring compliance. And again, how we can do that. What are the challenges around compliance and how we can address them? I'll also put up a client use case in terms of what we've done for another client, and then some concluding remarks on the questions at the end. So from a definitions point of view, what we mean by reference data is data that can be stored and reused in the organization. So it is in contrast to streaming and delayed and terminal feeds. So there's many reference data vendors out there. Bloomberg Data License is an example. Refinitiv Data Scope Select is another example. ICE, Markate, FactSet, Haver. There's many vendors out there. It's all about data that we can store and reuse in the organization. Now, reference data is a big part of the general market data budget. We see it between 10 and 30%. So if you're anywhere between a medium-sized asset manager to a large investment bank, you could easily be spending millions, if not tens of millions of dollars on reference data. Reference data comes with complex commercial models. Clients will buy reference data from vendors, and these vendors will provide that reference data under various types of flavors of commercial models. Some of them will be metered models. So every time a data call is made, you'll be charged for it. Some of them will have banded models. As long as you stay within a certain band of usage, you'll be charged a certain amount. If you go over that band, you might be charged potentially much more. There are, of course, enterprise deals, so pay a fixed fee and then eat as much as you like within a certain scope. Some volume-based models too, so based on the count of securities and so on. Some vendors will combine various models. Some of them will be simpler than others, but it's generally a complex area from a commercial standpoint. And to add to that, there's also complexities around the usage of that data. Yes, we might be able to buy that data from a vendor, but we can't use it or do with it whatever we would like. So there are certain attributes like references, like ISINs and QSIPs and CDOLs, which are fee liable, so we need to declare those back to the issuers for licensing purposes. We might buy data from a vendor, but that's actually a third-party data. So the vendor will provide that data, but we need to pay additional fees for the third party that's actually supplying the data. So it is not a. There are certain complex usage and compliance agreements that we need to abide by on that side too.
Right.
Now, yeah, Trip, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to jump in and basically echo what you're saying, but from a consumer standpoint, you're getting a lot of data with a lot of challenges because it's not easy to understand. There's not a lot of transparency in what you're seeing, and even the tools that any vendor can even provide are not going to help you as much as you need to be helped. There's just too much to it.
That's right. And I don't think it's controversial to say that things are not getting simpler and they're not getting cheaper. We've been doing this for a long time. We see how prices have increased and the complexity of the models have increased, and so have the compliance aspect of it as well. Most of the time, clients will be managing this in a passive way, so waiting for the invoices at the end of the month to react to them, and we think we can do much better than that. So in the next slides, we'll be
yeah, I think it's a good theme, Amjad. Getting out of reactive state and getting into proactive state. Thank you.
Exactly. Now, from the challenges that market data teams face generally when dealing with reference data, of course, there are some challenges specific to the reference data aspect. So we talked about the complex commercials, we talked about the complex licensing, but there's also changing business requirements. The businesses will evolve. Our users will have various requirements that might evolve over time. So we need to keep up with that. We might be dealing with legacy architecture, multiple accounts, multiple systems, old ways of pulling data down, which isn't always easy to untangle. Most of the time we are after the fact, so we're relying on invoices and other types of reports that come in at the end of the month, and by then it's too late. If we were to analyze the granular data, there's too much of it. So we might load it in Excel, that might break Excel. We have to have more advanced tools, and we just don't have time to do all of that. And market data teams don't just deal with reference data, they will have other things on their plate. So there's the time question as well.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd call out here. Certainly after the fact, when you're getting an invoice and don't understand what it's for, and it's a developer making a large call to a large account for expensive items, and you have good luck negotiating that. It's really hard to get that invoice walked away when it's $50,000 and you're not even sure who made that call, right? The other thing is changing, right? So there's always changing requirements. There's always new applications coming on board. They're asking for new securities and broader. They're adding securities they think they need for a little while, and then they're taking them away, right? So there's not a lot of control or transparency into what the actual requirements are, because today's requirements aren't what they were 3 years ago, but you're still paying for those securities from 3 years ago.
Absolutely. If we were to look at this now from a cost optimization angle, we're going to start by saying, if we wanted to reduce spend and costs, start using invoices alone or any post-fact reports is not enough to drive cost optimizations. This is something that we see by the introduction of more proactive approaches, more granular approaches. We really do drive cost optimizations much further than what we would do with invoices alone. So
as much as I love invoices,
as much as we like to process invoices,
right? Right. It's a number, right? And there's not. It's all about, you have to be able to allocate it, right? And you have to be able to push back and understand what they're charging you, and be able to create run rate out of that as well. So.
Absolutely. So we need technology really to collect the data. There's a lot of data that we connect and that we'll be collecting and that we need to process. So we do really need technology. All of these manual processes will not be enough. So we need to collect granular data. These are the request files. We need to parse them. We need to analyze them. But fundamentally, what we'll be doing once we collect these is really 5 things. We need to look at the commercial model. We talked about that. It's complex. There's many variations of this. We need to be sure that we're on the right commercial model for our usage, right? Some of these models, to optimize them, we need to look at how we're using data and optimize it that way. We can achieve up to 35% reduction of costs by doing this. We'll also be looking at the attribute levels. This information is simply not available in invoices, attributes, or data fields. We need to look at how we're using this. This can be quite an easy way to reduce costs, but the information is just not there in invoices and end of month reports. So we need to be looking into that and removing things that we don't need, or replacing it with maybe more cost efficient ways. Simulations is a big topic as well. A lot of clients are very interested in understanding the what if we change a commercial model, what if we were to send this request out, how much would this cost us? And that removes the spikes or surprises at the end of the month. It's also important to control unnecessary data requests, and these are typical from non-production environments, test environments, development teams, interns that might come in. It's an open tap, sometimes with vendors, and yes, the data will come back, but there will be cost for this. It's important to be able to see and control and limit access to this type of data or non-production data. And if we do have multiple vendors, it's also good to know whether we're buying the same data from many sources and being able to compare that.
Wouldn't it be nice to have your application owners come in and engage with you on what they want to do before they go ahead and do it, right? And I love the what if scenario idea, and it just gets you routed out in front of costs before they start happening, right? And also so that they can actually get the budget they need before having to go back and create all this drama. So that's where we need to be.
Absolutely. And in a time efficient way too. I mean, technology does this in a matter of seconds, and I'll show you that in a bit. So a couple of really screenshots showing how we do this in our system XMON. The first one is selecting the most optimal commercial model. It's a tricky one, that one, because we need to know how we're using data. That's a historical kind of loading of requests, and then comparing this or running this through different pricing models to see which is the best way. This is which is the best way to acquire that data, as in which is the best commercial model to do so. This is just a sample screenshot showing comparing two models. One is the metered model, the other one is a more banded model. And this is really saying that for our use case, based on our historical usage, we'll be saving, certain amount, 60%, 48% per category if we were to switch models. So we can do this in a matter of seconds once the data is loaded into the system. XMON is very good at that. It can really easily load up that data, run it through different models, and tell us whether we're on the most optimal model for our use case or not. What we see here is savings of around 30, 35%, up to 35% really. A lot of our clients might not be on the most optimal model, and it's very, very hard to know if we're not running these scenarios.
What about DL Plus, Amjad?
So DL Plus is it's a Bloomberg offering. So DL Plus really sits in a different category of systems. XMON tracks usage. DL Plus is more of a data storage and data distribution platform. It does reduce cost in a way which is removing those multi-hit costs, but really XMON will look at the actual dollar values of the requests, which is not something that DL Plus would do as far as we have here as information.
Right. So it's part of the equation. It's not the full.
Absolutely. It's not. It's a kind of a different angle to the reference data management side of things.
Thank you.
Great. So this is from an optimizing the commercial models. We should also, as we mentioned, look at the different data attributes. Data attributes are not available in invoices at the end of the month. These trigger certain pricing categories and therefore the entire pricing structures. It's important to know what they are and quantify them, and then ask the right questions. Do we need this data? Does it add value to the business enough that we were to be paying for that data? As an example, this is a screenshot again coming from XMON, which says, this data attribute, total equity field, is being requested by this user, triggering this category, and is costing us around $100,000 this year or year. Do we need this field? Is the question. A lot of the cases, we would remove certain fields that are not required. Maybe systems have sent those because somebody's put it in a test or somebody's
right
just by default added that. It's one of the lower hanging fruits, and this can save really a lot of money from a cost optimization standpoint. The next one is about limiting access to non-production data, typically non-production data. Access to data is an open pipe in certain cases. We need to be able to identify the source of that request, who is making that call in the organization, identify the business purpose. Is that a test environment? Is that a production environment? And if it's test environment and we don't want to spend money on test data, then we should be able to control that, at least be warned or be alerted in case somebody makes a request that's too expensive. In XMON, we've got something called the rules engine, which allows us to do exactly that. We can identify or apply a rule to a certain data consumer, and there's many categories we can apply the rule to, whether it's a cost rule, it's a volume-based rule, it's an asset class, the data category, and so on. So a lot of our clients will be using these rules to limit access to data over weekends or on non-production or test environments to really stop making requests or inadvertent calls of data that might be very expensive and that we will not see until the end of the month, of course, if we don't have a system like XMON.
It's amazing how often we see when we do an evaluation of a client's environment, the kinds of things we see in here and provide opportunities back for reducing costs right off the top. It's whether it's time of day, day of the week, why this dev environment is pulling this expensive data. And also when it gets shown back to some of those app owners when they're saying, wait, I had no idea I was calling this field. It's I wish I had known it was going to cost this much, right? So this whole governance piece really gets you out in front of it all.
Absolutely. It's all about control as well. It's all about identifying. And then once we have the data, we can create those rules to meet the specific business purpose. It's a lot of this is about being proactive about these levels of control. Now, the final category from a cost optimization standpoint, as we mentioned earlier, if you do have multiple vendors, right? Sometimes it's good to know whether we're buying the same data from across different sources. We can, of course, track those in the system, and XML will tell us these are your overlaps with, say vendor 1 and vendor 2, and this is the cost of the overlap, and these are the actual data attributes or field that are mapping across these vendors. So if we're buying data from Bloomberg and Refinitiv, and we're buying the same data across the board, the two vendors, XML will let us know. Will tell us exactly which fields as well. There might be reasons for this, right? So there might be regulatory reasons why we might be buying the same data from multiple vendors, or it might be that we just don't know and there is no reason for this. So it's one of those opening up the transparency and the governance elements of it so that we can take the right and informed decisions whether we want to keep these overlaps or not.
And there are definitely situations where you need to see the difference and know that there's two out there before making the change. It can't always be automatic, right? It has to be considered, because there could be reasons before you start making a change to a different source. There's always downstream impacts. So but we want to be able to provide at least the commercial difference.
100%. 100%. And all of the facts that we were mentioning so far in terms of the raw data itself, two clients might have the same raw data, but because of the way they need the usage or they need that data, the actions will be different. So there's a very important part of the context of the actions or the context of that data within a particular client case. And we cover those within our services team as well. We will contextualize this data for the clients and help them make the right decisions based on their exact use cases and requirements.
Well, they get your whole team, that whole team of amazing analysts that can get into this information, that can dig deep and provide you with actionable, opportunities for savings and control.
Absolutely. That's been very successful. That's XML Insights for us, and that's been a very successful rollout across clients.
Makes it easy.
So this is the cost optimization angle. We'll come back to that at the end. But the bottom line is, if we do roll these out in an organization, we will save, on average, and we look at the numbers, it's a 25% saving on the reference data costs across the board. So it is not a small chunk of things, but it's a lot of little things, not just one thing that will drive. And it's also keeping those in place as we progress throughout the months and the years of the rollout. From a compliance standpoint, looking at this now from the compliance angle, for us, really looking at compliance is looking at two things. It's looking at those declarations of the licensable attributes, ISINs, QSIPs, and CDOLs, and also the data fields that we might be buying from a vendor but are actually owned, or the data is fed by a third-party vendor. So we might be buying data from Bloomberg, but that's actually S&P's data or TP ICAP's data. So we'll get the data, but we might get a call a month or 2 or 3 later down the line from these third parties saying, did you know that you actually pulled our data down from Bloomberg 3 months ago? And if you want to continue using this, then we need to talk about licensing and so on. And that's a real challenge for organizations because, again, the data is available. It will be fed down, but we don't always know what's happened. And it can be surprising sometimes to have to deal with this.
Raise your hand if you love renegotiating your QSIP license. Yeah, I don't see any hands up.
So we address those. Again, it's a similar way because we'll be collecting those requests and parsing them and understanding what they have in a very similar way that we look at this from a cost angle. We can use the same logic to apply this on the compliance standpoint. So once we start collecting those requests and acting on them in real time, we can start counting those references. So if we were to use these ISIN codes, or because we need to do them in the organization, then we can report the exact number rather than having to over-report or maybe making mistakes and under-reporting and then having to adjust those in the future. It's a similar story with the licensable third-party attributes. We can pick those up and decide whether we need to have them or not. and also, put in place the right agreements at the right level to address those. And the question of control, if we don't want to be using any of those, then how do we prevent users from doing that? And all of these things are covered in XMON. So really, to go really quickly through those, we count everything in XMON. So you'll have the data, you'll be in a position of control or visibility on those. So if you're wanting to count the various types of securities, whether CDOL stickers per request or over a certain period of time, say the last 3 months or the last months, it's all available. And we can report exactly what we've been using. That's also a very similar case from the data fields or the attribute side of things. We know exactly which attributes we might be pulling from a vendor, but which are third-party license liable. Fitch and Moody's S&P are examples of that. And like I said, if we wanted to control those, we could use the XMON rules engine to let us know if somebody's making a request that might be triggering certain non-compliant access, whether it's at the security identifier level or whether it's at the data attribute level.
It's hard enough to negotiate with the ratings vendors as it is, or whoever the third parties are, without having. But if you've got the information at your fingertips and and you can control the data, you're going in with information. Whether if you're going to do a global site license, at least you know how big it is instead of guessing. It's a very expensive guess if you guess wrong. So why not have that kind of transparency and control over the flow of data, and also challenge your app owners to say, do you really need this ratings data in your application? Are they not getting it somewhere else somehow? Don't give those vendors any more ammunition than they need.
Absolutely. And that really covers the two elements of reference data management from a cost optimization angle and from a compliance angle. It's not just about cost and compliance, of course. As I mentioned earlier, from a cost standpoint, the average that we look at is 24-25%. We talked about the compliance angle, so no more surprises. Let's report what we're using. Let's control things that we don't need to use. But there are, of course, efficiencies as well and accountabilities that we will address in XMON. So whether it's building reports in a timely way, whether it's going back to our data consumers and providing them with the facts about their usage in a way that's timely, it doesn't take us days or weeks to get the data, or whether it's looking at this again from an accountability point of view. So changing the balance, I think, between the consumers and the vendors out there. So having the information, having the data to negotiate better and to have basically what they see, but see it with our own systems.
You
Chip,
got
I
it.
see you smiling.
No, I love it. I love the slide also. So let's
Great.
move on to your next thing. I like the example that we're going to bring on.
Perfect. So the last thing here about what we're going to show is a real client use case. So I'll just walk you through really quickly. So what we've done there. So that was a medium-sized asset manager. They have 3 vendor accounts, 8 applications pulling data down, more than $2 million spent per year. From a challenges point of view, in terms of reference data, their costs have been increasing. They had a couple of spikes. Some of the various systems or teams sent requests, and they didn't realize that these requests were not needed. They were sent in error, and they spiked the invoices, and they couldn't understand really the impacts of requests that have been sent, so they couldn't simulate the costs before sending them out. I should really say here at this point that most clients that we see, if not all clients that we see, will have the same types of problems. It's not specific to this client. Most of them will want to control cost, understand cost, and limit cost, and all of these things. So we came in, XMON was rolled out in 1 week from an initial rollout point of view. It took us around a month to roll out the active controls and everything else. So it's really not a long period of time to do so with our systems. But I think the important point here is to look at their costs over that period of time. So when they did roll out XMON, and I'll let you kind of look into that, the cost really drove costs down. And that's not one thing that did that, is the entire things that we talked about throughout this presentation. And this is what happens when we have the data. This is what happens when we start looking at this in a timely way and extracting those reports and analytics in a way that we can take decisions informed again on the data that we're collecting. So I'll let you look at the numbers.
Yeah. Sorry, Amjad. I'm just when you look at the time to value on this from the very left-hand side of that chart, it's very quick. we can ramp up very quickly for you. And evolve your process as you go, right? So you don't have to jump into a high technical implementation from the very beginning. We can start easy, get a lot of savings, and then build you into an environment in a state of living clean through reference data, right? So it's a very immediate impact.
Absolutely. And we're used to rolling this out across clients of very different sizes. It's a very similar story, whether you're a large asset manager, a medium asset manager, or a large investment bank. We've been doing this for a long time and have tuned the rollouts to be able to really achieve exactly what you said, Trip. So a very short time to value, meaning show me the value in the quickest possible way.
Right.
That's the last slide. Maybe we want to have some questions. I think at this point, Trip or Emily, don't know if we have any at this point.
Yeah, the one thing I did see come up was it said we want to ensure we don't access third-party attributes. I think we talked about the attributes there. We answered that. Oh, what about tracking DDS calls?
DDS calls. So I assume this is Datascope Data Desktop Solutions. We do
Yes.
track this. Yeah. So we do track this. These are calls made into the Excel spreadsheets. We're able to track this in XMON as well. These are calls that are made into Excel that trigger certain commercial models. They're tricky. They're very tricky to, and they open up a lot of cost traps, if I could put it that way. We can track those in XMON, and we can see the impacts of those on the commercial models. There's a lot to be said about this, but to answer the question, yes, we do.
Yeah, and everyone loves getting those random, invoices from Bloomberg out of the blue, right? Having to explain this. I mean, all this is, look, let's take the drama out of the process, right? Let's get out ahead of it. Let's get proactive, right?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat. I don't know if there are any. I can't see it from here, but.
No, I think that's it, Amjad. But if there are questions afterwards, and I think Emily's gonna jump on this as well. But we're happy to field them. Please let us know. On to Emily.
Guys, thank you everybody who joined, and thank you to our speakers for sharing their expertise and experiences with us today. If you found the webinar helpful, please fill out the survey that will populate upon conclusion of the webinar. And we wish everyone a wonderful end to 2024 and a happy new year. Thank you once again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.